I'm Cynthia. I'm the oldest daughter. One thing I want to say about my name, Cynthia, is my father named me Cynthia. Anne is the middle name that is the first born girl's middle name for generations. So Mom is Carolyn Ann, I'm Cynthia Ann, and Tina's daughter, first daughter, or only daughter, is Aubrey Ann. When I was in the 3rd grade, I decided I was going to change my name. So sometimes in the video you'll hear them say Cynthia. When I was in the 3rd grade, I didn't like my 3rd grade teacher because she threw my art project away. So I decided right then and then that I didn't like how she said my name, and that from that point on, I was going to be known as Cynthia. But now as an adult, I'm back to Cynthia. So I'm Cynthia. Because Dad was the one who named me, he never called me Cynthia. He always called me Cynthia, and I thought, I wonder if I was somehow, disrespecting him when I decided to change my name. Mother, she taught us to be very independent women, so I think she probably thought, well, Cynthia, whatever you want to do is fine. She wanted to make sure that we were strong, independent young women. To the point where I can remember her saying, don't let anything get in your way of going to college or being what you want to be. You can do anything. You can be anything. You can do whatever you want to do. And then many years later, after living with my husband for 5 years, she was kind of then at that point now saying, it's okay if you want to get married because we'd lived together for 5 years. But I think before that, she really was stressing that there shouldn't be any man that tells you what to do or how to do it, that you need to be your own person. So when growing up, we worked hard. Something I think about with our folks is that they taught us to work. Some of the early memories are picking worms, and even though we were tiny, we were little kids and pulling these worms out, and we would do 100 dozen a weekend and pick worms, and then they would all go into these boxes and into the bedroom that later ended up to be my bedroom when I moved from upstairs to the downstairs. And I don't know if you remember this, but we would go through these boxes of all the worms and count them out into dozens and mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, mark. So we had all these marks on the side of the box as we were counting out the worms. I was always raising money to go to college, so picking worms, hauling wood, lots of chores, had chores related to fixing cookies, fixing breakfast, vacuuming, which I don't really remember vacuuming, but maybe I had that chore. Lots of getting wood. And it's funny because all those years of getting wood, I always thought, why do we always have to go on Chief Joseph Days? I wanted to go up to the lake, I wanted to go to Chief Joseph Days, I wanted to party, and we always had to get wood on Chief Joseph Days. I was probably in my 30s when I realized that she was just choosing her battle, that she didn't want to have that one be a battle, and having to fight us going to get wood on Chief Joseph Days. Chief Joseph Day, or getting wood is also where I learned to drink beer. I was not very old, and we would go out and it would be really hot, and Dad would say, do you want to have a beer? And it tasted so good. During the early years, Dad would have what I called his hippie meetings, and his hippie friends would go down in the basement and they would talk about saving the environment and saving Hell's Canyon, and they would drink beer. It might have just been an excuse to drink beer, I don't know. And then they would put the cans up on the cupboard afterwards. And I was little, I can remember reaching up there, barely getting the leftover beer in the little bit of in the cans, and drinking that after his meetings. I think that they taught us to be good students, to keep our grades high. They taught us how to learn. I think that we're always interested in learning new things, and they taught us how to be good workers, to be teammates. Growing up in a basketball court or in a volleyball court, it was important to be good team members. And it was important to try new things. Mom and Dad usually had us trying new things and new experiences. I'm allergic to horses, so I didn't do any of the horse events with Mom and Dad. Instead, Dad would take me on float trips, and so I learned to fish with him, and I learned to row, and I learned to read the water and pick out where we would think that the fish should be. And if Dad said to bang your lure off of that rock and then off of that rock and off this bank and into that hole, 99% of the time, if I could do that, I would catch a fish. So even to this day, Dad and I still fish. We take trips up to Alaska and go halibut fishing. Dad's been up to Alaska, gosh, probably for 20 years, fishing for halibut and fishing for salmon. And the last 4 or 5 years, Scott and I have been able to go fishing for halibut and fishing for salmon, and we catch lots of fish. And it's been a good experience. After I graduated from college with a degree in political science, at that point when Dad didn't think that really was going to make any money, because of the experiences that they had doing campaign work with Senator Packwood, I got an internship in Washington, D.C., and then I worked in D.C. for a couple of years. And I kind of got caught up in the rat race of living in a city and being involved with politics. And Dad and Mom got invited to be part of a float trip down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. And they invited me to go. And that was a point in my life where my life changed. And we did that float trip. I think it was 16 days on the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. None of the members of our party had ever been on that river before, but Dad had lots of experience running rivers, and we'd done many trips on the Grand Ronde and on the Snake and on the Salmon River and Umpqua and Rogue, and lots of river trips. But when I finished that Grand Canyon, Colorado River trip, I went back to Washington, D.C., quit my job, and moved back home to Oregon. And I feel like that Oregon and Wallowa County is home. Coming in, driving into the valley, it feels very welcoming and feels like home. Our roots are very deep here. Growing up, so Mom was my coach and also the PE teacher, and at times that was difficult for me. It's interesting to hear Tina say that it really wasn't a big deal for her. It was a huge deal for me, to the point where I didn't really even know what to call her. Sometimes I called her Hey You. I didn't know whether to call her Mom or Coach or Ms. Whitty. I sometimes would just say, hey. But been very supportive. Dad was always at our games. Every Sunday would take us to the gym and we would shoot baskets, and spent lots of time, very, very supportive. I remember that conversation. I remember Mom sitting down with us and saying, I am now Ms. I'm no longer Miss Whitty, I'm no longer Mrs. Whitty, I am Ms. Whitty, and so are you. It was important to make sure that we were not seen as somebody's girlfriend or somebody's wife, that we were who we are. And I think they were very supportive of encouraging us, helping to pay for our college education, helping us with jobs, stretch new adventures, sending us to California. When I think about the California trips, I think that Mom was also thinking about how we could have experiences outside of Wallowa County, and that to be around people who were different than we are and different from people who had grown up here and experiencing another way of living, experiencing a city life, and also to be independent. But I remember at that time thinking that I pretty much owned that airplane, that I could do whatever I wanted, and yeah, I felt really empowered. I guess that would be a word that I would also use to describe how they have raised us and raised me, is that I felt very empowered. I have a confession story. When I turned 40, I had a little bit of a midlife crisis. The midlife crisis was that I was 40 and I was reflecting back on my life and felt like I had not accomplished much. And I blamed it on Mom and Dad because they said, you can do whatever you want, you can be whatever you want, you could be President of the United States if you want. I remember them telling us that. And I'm not president of anything. So I felt like maybe I had not quite reached my full potential. I wasn't even president of the local community college where I now work. That was a little bit of my midlife crisis. So the summer between my freshman and sophomore year at college at the University of Idaho, I was working at the Alpine Restaurant and Country Store, Tom Dairy, with Tom and Connie Dairy, at Settle Lake, and got a telephone call to come over there. It was I think it was early in the morning, and got a telephone call to come over to the Alpine Restaurant and Country Store. And Mom told me that Tina had been in an accident. And I remember thinking, you know, how bad is it? How bad is it? And Mom said, it's bad. And we had a classmate who had died of a head injury on a sledding accident the winter before that, and I kept saying, is it as bad as his? It is as bad as his. And Mom kept saying, I don't know, I don't know. And then my cousin Mike came down and picked me up and drove to Walla Walla. And when we walked into the hospital room, he was upset by how Tina looked, and I felt also a little bit of relief that, you know, you were still breathing and you were not dead. And then lots of touching. If I think about the work that Mom and Dad did in Tina's recovery, lots of touching, lots of making sure you know you're with people, lots of just touching your arm, touching Tina's arms, touching her legs, rubbing, making sure we're here, we're talking, and just lots of dedication and devotion. Kind of a life-changing event in their lives in terms of really focused on healing. And I put a lot of credit into the healing that happened. And they're very proud of how far Tina's come in terms of being able to graduate from college with a master's degree, great husband, great kids, just, you know, just shines.
Sneaking out of the house.
Yeah, there was one time when I snuck out. One time. Yeah, when growing up with 10 o'clock meant 10 o'clock. It did not mean 10:01. And we didn't really abuse it. But one time I did abuse it. And they called over to the boyfriend's house and said, is Cynthia there? Yeah, she's here. Send her home. So yeah, I got in trouble. I think overall, I think we're pretty good kids. When Mom first started getting into antiques, I remember saying, I don't want any of this old stuff in my house. Now we go antiquing at least 3-4 times a year together. I have just as many dishes that I'm collecting as she collects, and other furniture and other stuff. I can also remember saying, I do not want to wear any of these costumes in the parades, including pink hats or pajama bottoms or swimming suits or coveralls. I don't want to do any of that, and I think I've been in every parade that she has been in except for the Christmas parade. Yeah, I'm happy that that she has the interest. I've kind of wondered if maybe that she, as a PE teacher and as a mother and as a coach, she was nurturing and took care of kids and took care of us. And then in her older years, taking care of the cows and the mules and the horses, that has given her something else to focus on, to also be involved with and to keep stretching and keep learning. I think she likes that. One of the things I appreciate about both of them is that they have their own lives and they've had their own interests, but they support each other. They've role modeled what I think a good marriage is, about being best friends, but also being each other's, being true to themselves and supporting each other, and in whatever phase they were going through, but really being best friends and being a team. One phase that Mom was in was making wine. And Tina and I would go out with her and pick whether it was rose hips or some kind of berries or dandelion wine. The dandelion wine was so bad that it stunk. You know, wine takes months, if not years, to make, and it never turned out. It never did turn out. I think she ended up throwing that away. She also went through a phase where she was going to use every part. She was really into being self-sufficient and sustainable. And after Dad shot a bear, you know, they had the hide tanned, and then there was this bucket of bear lard on the stove. And she would cook with this bucket of bear lard, even making chocolate chip cookies with the bear lard. After that, I went down to California one of those summers. My aunt, her sister, sent me to the store to get butter for chocolate chip cookies. I went to the store, walked back with some margarine. That Aunt Louise sent me back to the store to get butter. You can't make chocolate chip cookies with margarine. And I thought, heck, it's better than bear lard. She also tanned leather, would take the hides and try to make leather. I'm not sure that ever really worked out. Made all of our clothes when we were younger. When she would make all of our clothes, really being self-sufficient and independent. So I think I was 12 when it was time to get my what's it called, the hunter's ed. And what's the license called? My hunter's permit. So Vicki Coggins was the teacher, and I got my hunter's permit, and I think I actually still have that. And then was going to go deer hunting with Dad. So all four of us loaded up into the truck, and we went out on somebody's field, and we were walking. And then pretty soon we were then at this point now it's just Dad and I. We were crouching, and then we were scooting along on our bellies, and Dad said, "They're right there." So, you know, as 12 years old, I'm not very strong or very big. And I hold the gun up, and it just falls down into the dirt. So he puts his hand up like this, and I'm adjusting, looking through the scope and looking, and I'd say a little bit up, a little bit down, a little over here, and I'd shoot. Meanwhile, Mom and Tina, every time I'd shoot, they'd pop up and look. Nope, the deer was still standing. So in there, I shot that deer in all quarters, and in the gut, and then in the head. There was nothing left of that poor deer. It was such a bad experience that's the only deer I've ever shot. I never went back. There have been times that I've gone out with him and gotten a little lost on hunting trips or fishing trips, and he would say, "You go that way, and I'll go this way, and we'll meet back in a few hours." And I would circle back around to the truck and just wait. "Did you see anything?" "No, I didn't see anything. How about you?" "Oh, yeah, I saw blah, blah, blah." Well, we don't have kids, so I think I've learned to be a good aunt. I like to think that I'm a good aunt to Austin and Aubrey. And to be a good wife means having a lot of patience and acceptance of projects and other activities that the other one is involved with. On my wedding day, Dad gave me some advice. He said that his piece of advice to me was tolerance. And as I've reflected back on tolerance, I think it's tolerance and also acceptance and support for our husband, or in his case, Carolyn, his wife, may not do things the way that Dad and I may want them to be done, or the hobbies that we have, but to support and accept what our partner is doing, and to be supportive of that. Some of the things that I think about growing up also that have been funny little sayings that I've heard, especially Dad say over the years. Every time we would push off in a raft or on a drift trip, he would say, "And we're off like a herd of fertile turtles." I'll crack up every time I think about that. He says that every time, whether we're fishing in Alaska, on a Colorado River trip, and we're off like a herd of fertile turtles. And when we were little girls, at nighttime, he would say, "Good night," and then he would say, "Good night." I'd say, "Sleep tight." He'd say, "Don't let the bug bite." I'd say, "Keep your powder dry," or vice versa. I never understood what keep your powder dry. I always thought, you know, why does base powder need to be kept dry? I was an adult when I realized that it's, you know, gunpowder. So, good night. The other one says, sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. Keep your powder dry. So I've said that every night. We're number one, not two, not three, not four. We're number one. Made breakfast for us. Yep. Every game day. Sat in the top row in the half court.
Yeah.
I just want to say how much I appreciate my folks for being good troopers, for being part of this interview, and for agreeing to be interviewed and tell their story, and how much I appreciate that. How much I appreciate the friends, Diana and Judy and Steve and Rats and Ted for also agreeing to be interviewed. I just want to say thank you to them, and thank you to Lois and Rex for being willing to fit in and be great support for me as I'm putting this project together. It's been an adventure, and I really appreciate everybody's willingness to be great troopers through all of this. Thank you. That's a wrap.
Good job.